Hey guys, my name's Luca, and I've been following politics for like 2 years at this point. And I've been following it pretty closely. The other summer, I worked a pretty lax job where I basically could watch videos and listen to podcasts for multiple hours every day. And I just watched political content nonstop. I watched debates from people like Destiny. I made sure to watch some right-wing perspectives as well. And throughout my own education online, as well as, taking some classes on political theory in college, blah, 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 and just observing the news and just living in a society. I think I have developed some pretty good political opinions. And I haven't been very vocal about sharing these opinions on social media. Social medias that I'm on a lot, which is Instagram, Reddit, Twitter, they aren't really the best platforms for talking about politics. It's hard to give nuanced takes about really complex, policy-heavy issues in 240 characters or with a little post that you share on your Instagram story. So I wanted to create a YouTube channel where I could talk about my political opinions, voice my concerns about movements, in hopes that you can watch it, learn something, and hopefully you can use some of the arguments that I present to convince your friends and family who disagree with you on policy. Because the more people who agree with my political perspective, which is a left-leaning perspective, as I will be demonstrating in this video, the more people who agree with that, the more people who are going to be voting for candidates who are going to be putting in policies that are going to help the world. And I, for one, want to help the world. So for this video, I wanted to talk about police reform because it's kind of the most contentious issue in the US besides coronavirus right now. I think maybe not besides, maybe they're equal. I don't really know what the ranking chart is of that. I'm sure there's some data out there somewhere. I'll put it here if there is, but it's an important issue. If you've live in the US and you've been paying attention to your social media or any news outlets, or just have gone outside like once, you are no doubt familiar with the widespread Black Lives Matter protests and calls for change in the American police system. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that we need a massive overhaul of the current system we have in place. The data is pretty clear on the issue. When all else is equal, Black people in the US, as well as other communities of color, suffer significantly more than their white counterparts. I'll provide some links in the description, but the point of this video isn't to convince you of the systemic injustices that are present in our judicial and our criminal justice, I guess those are kind of the same, and our policing system, and also in like almost every system that exists in the US. We've got a long ways to go, people. We've got a long ways to go. So I wanted to make a video kind of talking about police reform, talking about the defund the police, abolish the police, kind of online political perspectives that I've seen, give my thoughts on it, give my critiques on it, and hopefully you'll learn something from this video. If you disagree with me, hopefully you agree with me at the end of the video. And at the end of the video, if you still disagree with me, let me know why. Comment below. Send me some hate mail. Debate me. Come on the show. I'll debate you about it. That's good content. I want good content, all right? So yeah, if you've been on social media at all, you've most likely heard phrases like defund the police. Now, I think that these phrases and hashtags have absolutely a place in the political sphere. These kind of more simple catchphrase, bumper sticker things, well, they don't really represent a nuanced set of policy ideas, but they get people talking about the issues. And getting people to talk about the issues is really important. But I do have some contentions with the way that phrases like defund the police kind of limit us from a policy perspective and also give right-wingers some pretty easy straw man talking points to invent about what the left wants. When the idea of defunding the police kind of first came to prominence in the news cycle, right-wing news outlets immediately jumped to the most simple line of rebuttal, which is, if we don't have police, what's going to happen with the violent crime? There's going to be lawlessness in the streets. It'll be anarchy. Crime will skyrocket. Everyone will just be killing and murdering each other, blah, 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 blah. And I get why people buy this, because if you are not super in touch with politics, or you're just already a very conservative person politically, and you see on your news outlets all these headlines about how leftists and liberals are calling for defunding the police, well, yeah, if you don't look into it too much more, that's what I think too. And that's kind of my issue with the way that defund the police is framed. Yeah, it's a catchy slogan and it looks good on those, aesthetically pleasing Instagram story things that everyone's been sharing, which I think are great, by the way. I see no reason why politics and social issues can't be aesthetically pleasing. I mean, look at ContraPoints, come on. I mean, every video is crispy and clean, and as a photographer, I can appreciate some good camera work when I see it. So I think that the more that the left focuses on specific policies and specific movements to advocate for, the less strawman arguments the right will be able to invent against the movement. You can't invent strawman arguments, then you're going to actually have to engage with the ideas people are presenting. So before I get more into the subject about defunding the police, I kind of want to talk about a slightly more radical approach to the matter, which is abolish the police. Now, some people say abolish the police because they just want a restructuring of the police system, which makes me think, why are you saying abolish the police if you just want to restructure it? Whatever. But some people actually do want to outright get rid of policing in the US. People think that having state actors who can enact violent authority is inherently immoral. And I can kind of agree with that. I mean, I am a small L libertarian, so I want the government to mostly stay out of people's lives, but I think that there are a lot of areas where government action is absolutely justified, and police is a pretty clear one. For the foreseeable future, the kind of flaws that exist in society that lead to violent crime happening are going to continue to exist, and we're going to continue to need to do something about it. The best way to deal with this crime is to give the state a monopoly on force, have them create a police force funded through taxation so that if anyone is in danger, they're getting robbed, their house is broken into, whatever, they can call the police, and at no charge to them besides the taxes that they're already paying, the police comes and deals with it. And at least in theory, that's how it should work. Obviously, the police isn't that great. There's a lot of problems with it that I'll get into, but that's the idea behind it, right? I mean, if we got rid of police tomorrow, I'm sure Amazon would have no problem inventing Amazon Prime security, and Google would make Google Home Defense. I'm proud about that one. Google Home Defense, that's a good one. And if the monopoly on violence that the police have is replaced by private alternatives, well, then what you'll have is a society where the people who can afford it, the rich, the wealthy, the powerful, well, they'll have no problem protecting themselves, protecting their property. But if you can't afford it and your house gets broken into, you can't just say, Alexa, deploy 10 Amazon guards to my house. And among the other things that people in the lower class in the US already have to deal with, I don't think they should also have to think about providing funds for their own personal security. This seems to be a pretty bad idea in society. If you disagree, let me know. But I do think that the vast majority of Americans understand that policing plays some role in our society, right? I mean, there are lots of big structural things that we need the coordination of a police force and intelligence agency to deal with. I don't think the private sector could deal with massive problems in society like human trafficking. This requires a lot of coordination across different areas and between different communities. I mean, there's a reason that every modern society has a police force and will continue to have one for the foreseeable future. So if you do think that we should outright abolish the police, watch the rest of this video, because I think that if you do want to live in a policeless society, the best way you can do that is by implementing some pretty common sense reforms today and slowly moving that direction. So if you just acknowledge the role that police plays in society, you can pretty easily shut down a lot of right-wingers who create these crazy talking points that the left just wants to create an anarcho-communist society where Marxists overturn Western civilization. So defund the police. What does that actually mean? I've seen a lot of perspectives about what defunding the police actually means on my social media, because like I said before, it's a pretty general and vague term. But the general idea behind defund the police is to replace greater investments into the police force with more investments in preventative measures that will help better the communities and lead to them creating less crime to begin with. So instead of just trying to deal with the crime, why don't we just address the root causes of the crime, and then there won't be as much crime for the police to have to deal with. And this idea is great. I don't see any good argument against investing in things like healthcare, affordable housing, education, whatever. But I do think that a slogan like defund the police might actually limit policies that would otherwise be really helpful for the country. For example, many people have proposed the creation of a federal database to track police misconduct. So if a police officer racks up a bunch of complaints in one locality and gets fired because of it, they can't as easily transfer to another area and can't as easily be rehired without their new employer, their new police chief or whatever, actually knowing about these complaints. Having a federal database and not just, a state or local one will help ensure that this doesn't happen to people who are trying to move into different states to better their chances of getting employment, even though they're a bad police officer. Also, I see a lot of people complaining about the amount of training that police officers receive, and I agree with this. Police officers should probably receive more training than they are right now. And I don't know how much merit there is to this, but I've seen a lot of graphs that compare the amount of hours that someone has to get to become a licensed cosmetologist compared to the hours that a police officer gets. And I understand that police training is probably a little bit more intensive than credit hours that you go to a cosmetology school for. But regardless, I don't see how more police training can necessarily be a bad thing. But the thing is, more police training, it's going to require more funds. It's going to require more money. Like, we're going to have to pay for more police training. Things like body cams, which I don't see anyone disagreeing with except police officers. I had a friend tell me that they have a family member who's a police officer. She was complaining that her job as a police officer wasn't as fun because of the body cams that she had to wear. And kind of makes me wonder, like, what would you be doing if you didn't have a body cam that was tracking all your movements? But body cams, like most things, cost money to purchase, they cost money to maintain, and you're going to have to store the data and the footage somewhere. These things all cost money. If all we're focused on is defunding the police, we might actually miss the opportunities to enact a bunch of other policies that could also really help our society. Yeah. So instead of kind of promoting this more generalized notion of defund the police broadly, broadly defund the police, I think it's better to lay out specific areas that you think the police should be defunded in, or lay out specific activities that the police are currently engaged in that they shouldn't be. I'll go first. Police shouldn't be performing mental health checkups. This is crazy. I could see maybe that there's some people who need mental health checkups that are like super violent and off their rocker or whatever. But the police just don't have the training to do this. I mean, maybe they could if we increase training funding or something. But I think this is a area that is much better suited by social workers, mental health professionals, and yeah, maybe if the person is violent, police officer can go along with the social worker or mental health workers. Also, just like small domestic disputes, like people in the US kind of call the police for everything. If there's an argument in a restaurant, people's first line of action is going to be, oh, I better call the police about this. Maybe the police are suited to handle it. Maybe the police do a great job of breaking up the conflict in the restaurant and everyone else can enjoy a nice evening meal at their local Carrabba's. But when you put police in these situations, there can be a lot of escalation of force. Maybe a situation that wouldn't need to turn out violent ends up becoming a violent situation because of the presence of the police there. But yeah, even things like lots of traffic stops, like if someone's taillight is out, should a police officer really be pulling them over for that? We could probably just have like a routine traffic patrol that drives around and, you know, make sure that people's blinkers are working and stuff. And if they can pull people over, but they don't have guns, so no one's going to be worried about their lives dying. Because we've seen in this country, especially if you're black, people like Philando Castile just reaching for their documents and just get gunned down by the police. An area of life that doesn't necessarily need to have police force brought in, has the police force brought in, and violence escalates unnecessarily. So if you start your argument by saying, okay, well, maybe police shouldn't be doing mental health checkups, domestic disputes, traffic stops, or other examples. These are only just a couple I could come up of the top of my head and not off the document that I wrote before. But coming up with these specifics forces people to actually engage with your arguments and not engage with some dumb semantic rhetorical thing like defund the police. I'm sorry, it's not dumb, okay? It's a great idea. Hello? Sorry, I'm in like the middle of recording this thing. I'll talk about it. I'll make sure to talk about it. Bye. A lot of people are also mad at just the amount of funding that goes into police programs because they look at it in comparison with how little funded other services are that invest in community development. And I think this anger is somewhat justified, but I'm just not really concerned with how much the police are being funded. I'm much more concerned with the outcomes of policing in the US. If it turns out that if we cut every police budget by half and we see huge reductions in violent crime, society's better as a whole, then let's do that. But if it turns out that we need to actually increase funding in areas to achieve these same goals, let's do that too. Especially as someone on the left, I don't think we should be as necessarily concerned with the cost of programs. And I don't really mean this in some MMT, modern monetary theory sense of that we can just print unlimited money. But I mean, it's not like we're just throwing money into a hole when we invest in these programs. If we do big investments in healthcare, affordable housing, education, lack of education and poverty are huge correlative factors for crime. So we invest in these areas and then we see lower rates of crime. And guess what? Lower rates of crime means that there's going to be less people in prison. Less people in prison means that there's going to be more people living happy lives, working, paying their taxes, and not just sitting in a cell, hating themselves and not paying taxes. So you could make a good fiscal conservative argument for the police reform stuff. You know, if someone's really concerned about their spending, you can make that argument for them. Well, maybe if we spend it more in these areas, we'd actually receive more revenue because more people are going to be working, more people are going to be better off. But I'm not saying you need to look at this through a straight economic lens. I think most people will be convinced by the more moral arguments about just don't shoot black people, okay? Look, hashtag defund certain parts of the police, but also increase funding in other areas. But let's make sure we evaluate that well. So yeah, I get it. It's not a great hashtag. Hashtag defund the police. It's a little catchier. If it's nicer on the back of your Prius. No hate, I drive a Prius too. They're great cars. Let's talk about specific policies that we want to see in power, and let's make sure that our local and state and national and international representatives know about them. Instead of saying, let's defund the police, how about you say, let's end qualified immunity. Let's say, let's localize our police force more so we can break up the city unions. Let's end broken windows policing. Let's repeal the Controlled Substance Act. There's a great website at joincampaign0.com. I'll put the link in the description. I'll put it everywhere possible, okay? They list 10 big categories that are filled with detailed policies and tons of articles that show the data and the support and the reasoning for these policies. Because if you just go up to your local politicians and you say defund the police, where are they going to go from that? Like, maybe they just increase their budget by a little bit less than they were going to and call it a cut. Well, they're doing what their constituents asked for. If all you're asking for is defunding the police, I mean, local politicians can do that, and it might not really lead to any change. Also, if you haven't familiarized yourself with the schedule of local elections, right? The person who elects the police chief is the mayor in most cities, I'm pretty sure. And sheriffs are an elected position. So if you want to see your city or your county or whatever you live in, I don't know, if you want to see change in the area of police, well, get involved in local politics. Familiarize yourself with some policies that you think would actually lead to helpful change. Look at Campaign Zero. That's just one source. I'm sure there's many great other resources out there for you to find free of cost on the internet. Make sure you're voting for the best candidate when it comes to the issues that you hold near and dear. Maybe the mayor that's running for your city's election doesn't align with you 100% in policy, but make sure you're electing the person who is going to be most likely to enact the policies that you see. And if nobody who's running is even talking about the policies you want to see, go to some local protests, make your voice heard, share this video with other people so you can spread the word. Someone is not giving you what the city wants, vote them out, replace them with a better, more progressive alternative. So now that the sun is pretty much gone and I'm only relying on the screen from my laptop to give my video any sort of decent lighting, I think it's time for me to wrap this up. So what do you think? Do you think that we can live in a society absent any police? We can straight up abolish them and everything will be fine? What's your plan for doing that? If you have one, let me know. I think that'll be super interesting. I think that would be a great debate, a great discussion. Do you think that straight up defunding the police is the best course of action? Let me know in the comments or in my social media, as I said. But one other thing I wanted to end off with is that a lot of cities are actually defunding the police. I think Minneapolis, being a hotbed of these protests, announced pretty early that their city council was looking into a straight up abolishment or defunding of the police. Seattle's been in the news lately. I think New York as well have also announced kind of similar things. I haven't looked into these too much, and I have a sneaking suspicion that a lot of this defunding is really just a reallocation of funds. The police is going to be pretty much just as funded as it was before, and it's a kind of cheap way to appease the people who are just calling for a defunding of the police, which kind of plays into, again, why I think it's important to argue for specifics and not these more general statements. If it turns out that cities like Seattle and New York slash their police budgets entirely and crime spikes through the roof, be willing to look back and say, okay, maybe defunding the police wasn't so good of an idea. I don't think that's really going to happen with what's going on. But I guess what I'm saying is focus less about the ideological purity of your movement and more about the tangible results that we see happen because of the policies that we have pushed for. So, did you disagree with anything I said in this video? I hope so, because I'm trying to get some debates on this channel. I think that would be great content. Like I said before, I don't know, this whole filming process has been messy. The sun's been going down. I'm losing my mind, guys. I hate to break it to you. That's it for this video. I have a couple more video scripts that I've been writing up. I'm going to talk about my political position of social democracy. I want to talk about some other things. I'm going to talk about Joe Biden, universal healthcare. If there's any other kind of issues and topics that you want to see me cover, let me know. Totally willing to suggestions. And yeah, I'm excited to make more videos and convince more people of my correct political opinions, because trust me, they're all good. They're all perfect, impenetrable. But I've been rambling. Thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you found it entertaining and informative. Please share it with people. If you ever get an argument with someone who is, arguing against police reform, maybe this is a good video. Just send them. It'll showcase some arguments about this stuff. Yeah, whatever. I'm still rambling. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace out.